We've covered a lot of Commodores here on the channel, but one we have not covered yet is the only Commodore to come with 4 software programs built in. This is the Commodore Plus 4, and this is Vintage Geek. Just a quick reminder, if you like what you see today, please consider liking and subscribing. It does help us out a lot. And I do want to remind you of one thing today that is brand new to Vintage Geek. We've started a second channel, and we have a video up there right now that I'd encourage you to check out if you're into vintage computing. One of our staff members, Justin, who handles all of our tech needs here at the museum, has done an extensive look at the vintage computing iceberg. And for those of you who don't know, icebergs are basically a tier list of all of the weird and obscure things that exist within a topic. He's covered the first tier within the iceberg in this video, and it's very extensive and it's really great. I want you to check it out. It's on the second channel. The link is in the description below. And of course, you can always see all of our content from both channels at vintagegeek.com. In the 1980s, a lot of computer companies were experimenting with the idea of building software into the ROM of the machine. We've seen this here on the channel with a number of different systems, including the Tandy 1000 that bundled in a version of DeskMate. We've also had the Head Start Explorer that had its own kind of graphical user interface where you could access different programs, and even the IBM PS1, which had its own suite of software, all just baked right into the ROM of the system. And I felt like this was kind of an interesting concept, and it definitely made things a lot more quick if you were really wanting to just fire up the computer and get started and get working on a project. So I wanted to take a look at Commodore's concept with this, the Commodore Plus 4. Hardware-wise, this system was very similar to the Commodore 16, as I understand, but the main difference is that it came with 4 software programs pre-packaged in the ROM. That included word processing, a spreadsheet program, a database program, and a way to manipulate graphics on screen. I think Commodore really wanted to put something on the market at this time that was more productivity based and something that would be easy to put in the home at a low price point that you could really just jump into and get started, and that may be what the Commodore Plus 4 was. It came out in June of 1984 and really only lasted on the shelves for about a year. The original purchase price of this system was $299, which was pretty reasonable for a computer at the time, and of course this price got discounted as some of the wholesalers picked it up later and started selling discounted systems.
Announcing a fabulous sale on the Commodore Plus 4 personal computer, the first computer with 4 built-in software packages, the big 4 every computer owner needs, built-in graphics and sound commands.
As you can now see with some of the ads that are available from that time period online. But I want to take a quick look at the Commodore Plus 4 today. I want to see how this thing is put together, and I want to try it out. Try the 4 bundled applications and see just how easy it would have been to jump into a system like this in the home back in 1984. So let's jump into the Commodore Plus 4 right here on Vintage Geek. One of the things that's really noticeable right away about the Commodore Plus 4 is the different color scheme of the unit. I feel like the white keyboard on the darker black chassis makes everything kind of stand out and really look good overall. It's a different form factor than the Commodore 64 and the VIC-20, which essentially shared the same kind of plastic shell design. This one is slightly deeper, but it's also more narrow. The keyboard itself has a good feel of motion to the keys. Everything seems to work well, and I could see this being pretty comfortable to type at, which would be good for the built-in word processing program. Now, one thing that's different about the layout of the keyboard here is that they did add 4 arrow directional keys at the right-hand side, and those are a different construction than the normal keys on the keyboard. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought maybe those were actually membrane keys, but they're not. They are gray plastic. They just have a shorter throw than the rest of the keys on the keyboard. You also have 4 function keys across the top, and those can be doubled up. There is an LED power indicator just below the keyboard on the left-hand side, and of course above the keyboard and function keys is the rainbow banded Commodore logo for the Commodore Plus 4. It's interesting that it kind of has a bars approach as it goes across that logo. That's different than what it looked like on the Commodore 64 and some of the other models, but I do like the overall appearance of this system. Now, if we look at the actual connectors on the back panel of the Commodore Plus 4, we have a number of different inputs and outputs here. Starting at the left, we have the physical power input port. One thing that did stand out for me with the power connector on this unit is that the box itself has labels that tell you what each of the connectors on the back panel do. And on the power socket one, it actually says the round end of the power cable fits in this socket. for this particular port, which I find very funny considering it is a square port. So I don't know if that means that they changed the design after they had already printed the box, or someone just made a colossal mistake, but I find that to be a little bit funny. Moving to the right of the power adapter, we have the serial port for the Commodore Plus 4. This is the same serial port that was used all the way back from the Commodore PET days, so there's nothing electrically different from this and other models. Next to that, we have a connector for the Commodore cassette, which you could use to load and save programs. Presumably, for the majority of time, you would be saving word processor documents or perhaps spreadsheets and other files that you've manipulated with the system. When you move to the right of there, you have the user port. This is just an edge connector, similar to what you would see on the back of the Commodore 64. And then there is another expansion port to the right of that. Finishing up the connectors on the back, we have 2 joystick ports, and then we finally have the multi-pin video cable that could actually connect to the various forms of video monitor. It may have composite as well as RGB out, although I'm not sure. We did not get the original cable with this unit, but we are going to be using the actual RF out, which is on the side of the Commodore Plus 4. That also has the switch to select which channel that is being output on. I've got the Commodore Plus 4 all set up and ready to go. I am, again, using the standard RF output. I'm not using the composite or RGB video outputs, and I am using a standard television today, running through a VCR so that we can capture it just as it was originally intended. And the only other real connection here is the power adapter. I had read online that it used the same adapter as the Commodore 64, but that wouldn't be the case given the fact that it has the square plug. So maybe there were a couple of different design variants. If you know more about that, please sound off in the comments below. Let's give this a try and see if our Commodore Plus 4 is in working order. I'm going to go ahead and power it up now. Our Plus 4 is alive. It comes right up to Commodore Basic version 3.5. This machine does have 64K of RAM built in. And one thing I did not mention earlier is that one of the biggest problems with the Commodore Plus 4 is that this version of BASIC is incompatible with other Commodore systems, including the Commodore 64. So really, you couldn't run Commodore 64 software on the Plus 4, which made it far less appealing considering the vast library of software available for the C64. And I'm sure that that may have contributed to the ultimate demise of this system. But let's get into it and see what we can do with our Plus 4 now that we're booted up and ready to go. It does say at the top, without even reading the manual, that the 3+1 is on key F1, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that first. So as the manual says here, it's giving us a prompt after we hit F1, and now I should be able to hit the return key and get into this. All right, 3+1. Looks like we are starting out with the word processor function. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of typing here. It does have upper and lower case. All right, so it is a scrolling word processor. It's not going to automatically move down to the next line. There's no word wrap, as it were. It does show you carriage returns on screen. Okay. So honestly, I mean, everything looks great on screen. This is, of course, the television output, and everything is pretty crisp and clear. I like that. Everything is very distinct looking. The keyboard's pretty good as far as being able to touch type. No real issues there. Obviously a far cry from the cash register type keyboard that was on the original Commodore PET. So nice design here overall. I think I like it a little bit better than the Commodore 64 keyboard, if I have to be honest. Now, as far as the word processor functionality, let's see how these arrow keys work. So back, and you can move up a line. Okay, you can do that directly. That's great. What if I want to insert something? Can I? So it's going to overwrite by default. It doesn't look like you can delete things in front of them. You have to be behind them to delete. But the delete is actually shifting everything back. So that's interesting. Okay, so you can insert, you just use the shift on the same key as delete. I can put that H right back in there. Let's see if we can insert superfans here. Does look like you have to hit insert for each character though. Right. I mean, this seems like a fairly capable word processor. Obviously, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I would assume most of you out there are not going to watch a 10-minute video on how to type in a word processor, but it is functional. I could see where this would work pretty well for home use, and it is ready to go out of the box. You don't have to load any software, nothing from cassette, nothing from disk. It's just built right there into the ROM. So let's go to the next built-in program and see what that looks like. Conveniently, there is a reset button that they added for the Commodore Plus 4. This was not available on earlier systems, and it is right next to the power switch on the right-hand side of the unit. I will say that navigating between the different integrated software packages is not quite as straightforward as I would have assumed. I kind of thought that you would have different function keys to access each of the built-in programs, but apparently you always start from the word processor, which from the prompt after hitting F1 you hit enter. You're in the word processor, and then you have to hit the command key, then you hit Commodore C for command mode, which brings you to a W prompt, and then you hit TC, and this takes you to calculations apparently, which is the spreadsheet part of the program. So I find that kind of interesting. I'm just going to follow along very quickly with the exercise in the book just to show how this works. Obviously we have cells on the screen. We can type in data in the cells similar to any modern spreadsheet. So 100 here, and then we can move down. We'll put 50 here, 75. Then I assume we could put in the fourth cell some kind of mathematical formula to do something with the data above it. I'm not sure how to do this, so let's see. According to the book, to enter a formula, you have to do Commodore F. It seems like these cells are referenced by row number and then a semicolon and then column number. So if I go to formula, let's put in 1, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3, 1. There we go. It gives us 225, which should be the sum of those three values. Then I should be able to put in another formula here. Oops. Formula mode. We're going to do 4, 1 divided by 3, which should give us the average. You need to put an actual number sign to distinguish that that's a real value and not just a cell. There we go. And the average of the first three cells is 75. So definitely has all the functions you would expect to see from an early spreadsheet here. And I think once you get the hang of it and learn all of the nuances of how commands are entered, how to go into formula mode, seems pretty functional. And there's all sorts of things you can do according to the manual with different screens. You can change colors on things to make it easier to see. So I'd say a pretty good spreadsheet function that's built into the ROM here on the Commodore Plus 4. I've decided to not take a look at the file manager aspect of the program just because it's pretty rudimentary. We're talking about basic database functions. It does look like it would be pretty useful for home inventory purposes and things like that, but I think its functions are fairly self-explanatory. What I really wanted to take a look at here was the graphics functionality of the Commodore Plus 4. And according to the manual for the integrated software applications, there's really only a short section on graphics, and it's about using it to create graphs for the spreadsheet and then integrate those back into the word processing program. I find that an interesting choice because it's actually using the text mode graphics to create the graph because, as they say in the manual, you would need to be able to have this in normal graphics mode, not high resolution, so that you could print it on any standard printer. Which is great for a practical application at the time, but I really want to see what the Plus 4 is capable of from a graphics standpoint. So I'm going to have to take a different exercise to try this and see what we can do with the graphics mode. Your Plus 4 screen contains 25 rows of 40 characters each, or 1,000 total character positions on the screen. Each character is formed out of single dots with 8 rows of 8 dots, each making an entire character. Your screen has a total of 320 dots on each row and 200 rows of dots, or 64,000 dots altogether. Your Plus 4 has control over every single dot. Using normal graphics, you have limited control over the individual dots. You must use the 256 characters in each character set built into the Plus 4, which lets you create many pictures, but think of how many you could create if you could simply control each dot by itself, which is exactly what I want to try with the graphics mode of the software. Hoping they have a good example of this in the book. Alright, so now we got some colored grid lines on the screen, and I see that these are only 1 pixel, quote unquote, wide, which is kind of cool. There does seem to be some artifacting happening as it's doing all of the drawing of the lines. I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe that's intentional. It looks like the system is fairly capable graphics-wise, but I'm going to try the last example in the book, which says that it creates a neon sign-like effect. So let's see what that looks like. We've got the last program shown in this section in the book ready to run here. Let's see what this looks like. I mean, it is roughly a neon sign effect. I do like that. And it is a actual hand-drawn high, which is fun. So pretty good example of how the graphics mode works here on the Commodore Plus 4. And honestly, it's a pretty capable little system for the time. I see what they're doing with having the 4 applications built in. The graphics mode is a little bit more of just a mode of operation. This is kind of similar to things that we've seen in the Apple II and the TRS-80 color computer, where you have the different graphics mode and then you can utilize those within BASIC. But it's pretty cool nonetheless. I would be interested to see what the graphing function looks like with the high resolution graphics, but the actual manual doesn't go into how to do that. They only use the text version. So I'll have to do a little bit of studying on that and try it at some point. Now finally, I'd like to cover one other thing with the Commodore Plus 4. That's not exactly one of the 4 modes. This is just another thing covered in the BASIC programming language, which again is a more advanced BASIC, and it's not the same one that was used in the Commodore 64. They go into the book about how to use the sound functionality that's built into the system. In order to demonstrate the sound, I'm going to use an example in the book that they call the Great Commodore Plus 4 Music Machine. This is going to take a few more lines of code, so let me get to typing. Alright, and we have our complicated music machine program, so let's see what this does. Oh no, I messed up 1070. I am happy that it tells me which line I messed up on. There was a lot of typing here. Conveniently, with the arrow keys, you can actually move up here and we can edit this. Maybe that zero's not supposed to be there. That might be a typo in the book. Okay, well, we got further. Let's see, what's 8070? Why is there an 8070? All right, we got the Great Music Machine, and we've got letters and numbers on a scale. All right, so, oops, 35. What did I do wrong on that one? $8 sign. I think they're missing an actual number in the book here because they haven't, if A is less than or greater than something. If it's greater than 57, then it's 50. But since we're using A minus 48, I guess it would be if it's less than 50, right? Let's see. Let's try that. Also feels like there should be an if statement there. That's pretty cool. The only one one that's not working is 1, which means I probably should have made it if it's less than 49 instead of less than 50, just because of the math involved. But that's pretty neat though. How do I get back into regular mode here? I'm going to try to fix that. There we go. So now we should be able to do 1 through 9. Nice. The great music machine lives. That is pretty neat that they're actually demonstrating though how you can combine graphics and sound and actually show the little note on the kind of faux scale here. So that's pretty cool. I like the little program that they give you as the demonstration in the Commodore Plus 4 book. So definitely some good capabilities here for graphics, sound, and of course the built-in word processing, spreadsheet, and database. And overall, it's a pretty cool little machine. And that's our official look at the Commodore Plus 4. Another great machine from Commodore, even though it was short-lived. And it is really unfortunate that they didn't make it compatible with the vast library of Commodore 64 titles, because it seems like a pretty capable machine. It's a good form factor, the keyboard feels nice, and overall, just a pretty good experience. I'm glad we have it here for the Vintage Geek Museum. Hey, just a quick reminder, if you liked what you saw today, please consider liking and subscribing. It does help us out a lot as we grow. One of the things that helps us out the most, though, is if you would consider becoming a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website, and for just under $20 a year, you get access to all of our content commercial-free, plus we have a lot of bonus goodies and a whole lot more. And speaking of extras, we now have a second channel for Vintage Geek to go in a little bit more deep dives in some of the technology we have here at the museum. Our very own Justin Strong is hosting some of the videos on this channel, and they are really great. I encourage you to check it out. The first one is up there now, and it is the beginning of a series of iceberg videos about the vintage computing iceberg, as it were. All sorts of interesting facts about some of the computers and products that you love, and it's all there on the second channel. We'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek.